Welcome back to the BWI Daily Recruiting Edition. It's Tuesday, June 14, which means Ryan and I have plenty to recap. I'm Greg Pickel. He's Ryan Snyder from BWI Illustrated. We have a commitment to get to from the weekend, a decommitment, a couple of new offers that went out following camp, a visit elsewhere for a top Penn State target that I think Penn State fans are going to want to know more about, and a little bit of odds and ends to finish things up as we sit here in the middle of June. Ryan, things are chugging along here. You're as busy as ever before. Compare this to last June when guys were able to get back on the road for the first time in a long time compared to now where guys were able to take February, March visits, things like that. Does it feel about the same as it did last year, even though the visit calendar has been much better for prospects in this cycle compared to ones that were deciding last year?
I would say it's not quite as busy as last year because last year we had unofficial visits popping up pretty much every single day, where, right now we haven't really seen that as much. And whether that's 2023, 2024, 2025, there hasn't been a lot of midweek guys coming up for personal visits. And that was kind of the difference last year where you saw that. I mean, I think there was somebody on campus who was something like 23 of 26 days, something like that, where right now, of course, you have the camps, you have the official visits over the weekend, and there are a few guys who are popping up for unofficial visits. I just wrote about one today who will be here Wednesday and Thursday. Fans can check that out on the site. But for the most part, we're not seeing a ton of those weekday, Wednesday random kind of visits. We saw Derek Bowler, of course, last week, but really he's been the only guy to pop up for an unofficial.
So Penn State picks up its first commitment of the month over the weekend. We'll start to show there. Yazeed Haynes visited unofficially for a camp 2 weekends ago and really impressed everyone with his speed. He's a wide receiver from North Penn High School in Pennsylvania. Ryan, he comes back for an official visit this past weekend. Things go well over the 48 hours he was on campus, and he ends up becoming a Nittany Lion before leaving town, or I'm sorry, before the weekend ended at any rate. I'm sure he probably committed before he left town, but at any rate, you find here a former Rutgers commit that decommitted from the Scarlet Knights after about he was committed for 3 or 4 months. Penn State pushes here to land a talented wide receiver that is, of course, from the Keystone State, and they get their guy here in a pretty quick amount of time.
Yeah, he was committed to Rutgers March 24th and decommitted pretty much exactly 2 months later on May 23rd. So, I mean, Yazeed, look at the testing times, right? 4.39, 40, 10.10 broad, 4.25-ish shuttle, all incredible times. So, I mean, but Yazeed is still, I wouldn't say a perfect prospect. We've watching his film. I wouldn't say he's a perfect pass catcher yet, but he's improving, and that's great. And that's one thing I think that's interesting here is the whole athlete label. And that's where I think we're going to end up ranking him at on 3 is just more of an athlete because Penn State has a lot of interest in him as a defensive back. And, at those times and at 6'1", 170, boy, I mean, that you can really make a strong argument that his ceiling would be best at defensive back. But, he's played a lot more wide receiver than DB so far. He feels more comfortable at that position. And look, either way, I mean, there's a lot of potential here to find a heck of a player. Like I said, when you have those kind of testing times, there's a lot to be excited about. So I'll just be curious to see where Charles Power and our staff rank him. I think athlete is the way to put him. And then I'll just be really curious to see if he plays a little more defensive back this season, because if I just from reading the tea leaves, I do think that if Penn State could prefer a position, I kind of think it's defensive back. But, this is going to be totally Yazeed's call. And, right now I definitely get the impression that he's more comfortable at wide receiver. I mean, he flat out admitted that, but then also said he'll do whatever's best for the team. So we will see in the months ahead.
Haynes, a very good prospect at Penn State. Of course, now, like the rest of his class, will have to hold on to throughout the remainder of the year until signing day comes. Penn State still a top 10 class of 2023, according to the On3 consensus rankings, with 12 commits now. It was 13 for a little bit of time. We'll get into why that number is 12 in just a few minutes, Ryan. But yeah, just a final thought on Haynes here. I think it was pretty clear that Taylor Stubblefield, Terry Smith, Manny Diaz, Mike Yurcich, and of course, ultimately James Franklin really felt like this was a guy they wanted to go all out for and a guy they wanted to make sure was a priority because he did have some other visits planned. You talked about that on last week's show. I assume those are off the table now that he's committed to Penn State.
Yep. He's, as of now, I mean, there's no plans to go to Minnesota, no plans to camp at Georgia or Tennessee. So, things always change, but I've been talking to Yazeed a little bit now. I don't get the impression he's one to say something and then switch it up 10 days later.
All right, so Penn State now with 2 receivers committed in the class of 2023, but of course, we know Johnny Shakur is going to be a receiver. We'll see where Yazeed Haynes ends up, offense or defense. Penn State has plenty of time to make that decision. We'll talk about it later this year on the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. Ryan, let's move on to the official visitors and recap the guys who were on campus for 48-hour trips with Haynes from Friday through Sunday. Penn State obviously picking up just one commitment, but I think we both agree they inch toward more coming out of this weekend. So you can start debating wherever you want. I think fans probably would prefer you give anything you know about Evan Link at this point in time, which I know is not much because he is not the loudest or flashiest or most interview-loving kid in the world. But you can start there. You can start wherever you like. But it was a good weekend for Penn State, no doubt about it.
Well, Evan's a great kid. I mean, look, so if I had a kid and I had to go through 3 official visits and had all this
Yep.
pressure of trying to figure this out, as someone who works in the industry, I don't know if I'd be saying, "Hey, do all these interviews either." I mean, I totally get it. There's enough going on with all these coaches reaching out and such a pivotal point in your recruitment. But yeah, look, good visit. You're going to hear that from sources all the time. That's consistent. I've never really heard anybody thinking that they didn't do a good job during a visit. So that's the
Right.
feedback there. Uh, I know his father wasn't able to make the trip. I believe he was up in Boston. Evan's brother attends Harvard, so I believe he was up there for something. But I don't look at that as a big deal just because the family's been here multiple times before. Engineering program is a plus for Penn State. Let's see how it stacks up in the end, though, because academics are going to be massively important here, and as they should be. He's an incredibly bright individual. And, when you have Stanford and Michigan in there, too, that's both those schools have a lot to offer from that perspective. So I will be curious to see how this shakes out. I expect Michigan official visit this upcoming weekend. And I still think there's a good chance he goes to Stanford for an official visit. He has not put that out there yet. I'm still trying to catch up with Evan here at some point. But, we'll see. But I think that I still believe Stanford and Michigan are the main 2 schools to watch there. I'll just riff through a couple other guys here quick. Elliott Washington, Alabama commit, 5'11", 187 cornerback from Venice, Florida. Good feedback from Elliott. Right now, I think I think he's going to end up at Michigan State or Penn State. The fact that he's taking these official visits, the writing's kind of on the wall there. Maybe things will change with Alabama, but Alabama doesn't seem to be pushing incredibly hard to fight Penn State and Michigan State. Just from reading the tea leaves, I don't know. Maybe that's not completely correct, but I get that impression. And the fact that he's visiting these 2 Big Ten schools tells me that there's a good chance he's going to end up at one of those. So let's see where that shakes up.
Yeah.
Dakaari Nelson was probably the player who I received the best feedback from a variety of people. I've spoken with, I don't know, 3 or 4 sources now, and he was a consistent
Yeah.
name that kept popping up. The big question with Dakaari is just, when is he going to decide? Because if this goes into the fall, I don't think that's good for Penn State. I think Penn State probably is the favorite at the moment, but they don't, this class will probably be 70, 75, 80% filled once we get into August, or at least Penn State hopes that it is. And, that by that time, they should have another defensive back or 2 committed. That they're going to have to figure that situation out. So it makes sense that in preseason, when training camp's going on, that they could maybe push Dakaari for a commitment. But right now he seems at least he seems set to visit Tennessee and Auburn and Clemson and Texas. Those were the 4 schools that he said he really wants to see this season. He did note that he plans to attend the Auburn-Penn State game, so that'll be interesting for this recruitment down the road. So, but again, like I'll come back and stress that this was the player that everybody seems they really impressed with. I consistently was told that Dakaari and the coaches had a really strong relationship, and that the big focus this weekend was getting talking to the family, making sure that they're comfortable with him coming north. And not only did Dakaari say that, but a lot of other people spoke highly of just the impression they made on the family. So 3 good things there. Greg, you caught up with Tyriq Blanding. Do you got anything to add on that?
Well, so I mean, I think Blanding's a pretty interesting player, Ryan. He's a 3-star defensive lineman out of New York who I had the chance to catch up with on Monday afternoon. So, it's interesting because we all know that in the moments after these visit ends, they're usually all, especially official visits, everything's all rosy and hunky dory and blah 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 because you're basically weighted on head and toe for 48 hours, 2 days, an entire weekend, what have you. So, when you talk to a guy a little later in the week, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what have you, and it gets a little bit further removed from that time on campus, you can sometimes get a different vibe for guys. And I thought he really spoke highly of Penn State, Ryan. He really enjoyed the time that he had getting to know John Scott Jr. and, of course, Deion Barnes and Manny Diaz and James Franklin. So he made note of the fact that James Franklin was always around during the weekend, whether it was when they were at meetings or when they were at camp or what have you. He was very impressed by his enthusiasm and his ability to always make sure he was around and showing guys and their family a good time. So, I think that Penn State, depending on how hard it wants to push here, sits in a really good spot. Now, we'll see where else he wants to visit. He said that he was a little bit late getting through the official visit process, so the only one he has on the docket for as of this moment is a trip to Michigan later this month, and the Wolverines, of course, be a player in that recruitment. But I like where Penn State sits right now. He said he's going to compare. He wants to go to Michigan to compare it to Penn State and see if it matches Penn State at all. So I think that's good news. Obviously, we talk a lot about, do you want the first official visit? Do you want the last official visit? Well, if you have the first one, you better be able to set a high bar. And from what I gathered from talking to him, Ryan, it certainly seemed like Penn State did.
Good. Awesome. Good to hear. I did notice that him and Kane were out there together on Sunday. They stuck around a little bit after their official visit. There seemed to be a large group of New York City kids camping this past weekend. And I didn't know Tyreke and Musa had the relationship they did, or at least it appeared that way. I didn't really. I'm not allowed to talk to them while they're on campus
Right.
or at camp. So I didn't catch up with them yet. But just seeing them hang out together on Sunday, that was interesting to me. Speaking of Musa, this safety board's deep, and that's kind of what I'm still trying to get a gauge for. I just talked about Dakaari. I think if Musa really wanted to commit in the next week or so, I think Penn State would struggle to turn him down. Of course, King Max coming on campus this upcoming weekend. There was a lot of talk that he was maybe starting to lean towards Michigan State. We'll see, though. He left there without a commitment, and Penn State's been pretty adamant, or at least people I speak with, been pretty adamant that they're in a good spot with King Mac. And of course, now he's coming back with Conrad Hussey this weekend. So that'll be very interesting to watch. One other thing I do want to mention is Corey Lucius, linebacker from Tampa Catholic. I had Corey Lucius at around 6'2", 205, 210 coming into the weekend. That's what we all thought. He checked in substantially lower than that as far as weight. So obviously, great player. I think Penn State's going to continue recruiting him. But I would also just note that I think they need to see growth from him if he's going to be a true linebacker from them. I have him now listed at 180 on his profile, and he was a little less than that this weekend. So, of course, Penn State wants to see these guys at, like I said, 200, 210, and then bulk them up to 230 when they get here. So he's got a ways to go from a growth perspective. And because of that, I think we really just come back to Tony Rojas, Tamir Robinson. Those guys are incredibly important. And, we will see how it shakes out after their official visits this weekend.
All right, very good. Yeah, one thing I'll note, Ryan, you mentioned the weight change. Tyriq Blanding, of course, is another guy who checked in a little bit lighter than expected. He told me he was around 260. We had him listed at 280 on his profile, so probably worth noting that as well. I think you wrote that in your insider notebook too. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point, you look across the board here, and that's what's important about these official visits is that you're going to learn a little bit more about guys, whether it's from a personality perspective, whether it's about a weight or a height perspective, vice versa. I mean, you can learn a lot going to see them at their schools and things like that. But as we all know, when you get them on campus, you have a little bit more time and opportunity to learn more things. So it's certainly interesting. And you've done this a long time, Ryan, to see how things can change when a guy gets on campus. So we'll see how that plays
we see
out.
That. Yeah.
Yep.
I was just saying, we see that every year. Every year, there's a couple guys who don't go to camps. And, Penn State's not allowed to go to their school and get measurements. The coaches and, player, they can tell them whatever they want, but the actual measurements are what Penn State wants. And all these schools, they need to know that. So, we like I said, we just see that a couple times a year, not necessarily always with official visits, with unofficial visits, things switching up and that having an impact on a player's recruitment.
So when you look at the official visitor list, obviously we wrap up one weekend and look ahead to another one. This is a big one for Penn State with a lot of commits on campus. But just to wrap up kind of the official visitor portion of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show, Ryan, any guys you want to touch on real quick that are going to be here this weekend?
London Montgomery, I think, is a big one. There seems to be a lot of positivity there. I think he just wrapped up a Virginia Tech visit. There's talk about Boston College as well. But this is a player that I was I kind of thought would be maybe be committed by now. So let's see how this
Same.
official visit goes. I think King Mac, I've been told multiple times that this weekend is the weekend to watch for a King Mac commitment. So he will certainly be a player that has my attention quite a bit. Jakeem Jackson's an interesting guy out of Osceola, just because he has a good relationship with Zane Durant, and that's always been interesting to me. I guess they played 7-on-7 together, trained together, so yeah, I would expect that combination to have an impact. And then of course you got Tony Rojas, Tamir Robinson, Derek LeBlanc. Caden Proctor is still expected to come. One thing I was told originally a couple of weeks ago, I was told that Caden was going to come by himself, which is never good. I mean, a player can't make a commitment to a school without mom seeing it, right? Well, now mom is coming, from what I was told, and I think that's pretty important for Penn State because they have a long way to go here. I still expect them to end up at some other schools, but I don't. It was kind of, to me, it was just like, well, if mom's not coming, why are you even hosting him, right? I mean, I just don't
Right.
see how he's not going to make it back here before he decides. So to me, that I'm going to say it was a wasted official visit. You got to host a guy like that, but it just kind of felt like, are you really going to achieve what you want to achieve if she's not here? But she will be coming, so that's big now. But Tamarian Parker too, one other guy, man, out of Alabama. He is a player that Penn State seems to be progressing with. There was some Southern schools that I thought were the true favorites there, but some of them schools have kind of backed off now. And from a relationship perspective, Penn State seems to be in a pretty good spot there. He's a guy that I consistently keep asking, who am I sleeping on? Who do I need to get a better feel for? And Tamari, and everybody calls him TJ, is somebody who consistently keeps getting mentioned there. So I would say this is probably one of the biggest weekends coming up for Penn State, just the names who are here and what could result in commitments. But I'll also note that 24th, the final weekend, I'm definitely going to expect more guys to be added to that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that 24th weekend, when it comes to just uncommitted guys, is actually probably the weekend you see the most visitors there. Of course, all the committed guys are going to be here this weekend too, which is all the more important with guys like Tony Rojas, Tamir Robinson, and so many others.
What do you make of the London Montgomery Trayon Webb situation right now, and where Penn State could go, and what the expectation for fans should be with two very talented guys on the board, but also a very talented and large running back room already at Penn State?
First to commit. I mean, I really think it's that simple. They like both a lot. Who commits first? That's really what it'll come down to. Trayon Webb would have obviously had his opportunity to do that this weekend. I was told when he went to Florida that Florida certainly put some pressure on for that, and he didn't budge with that. So that's a positive sign there for really Penn State and South Carolina. I still would probably lean towards Florida being the favorite, but if London Montgomery commits this weekend, I think that's it. I mean, I've had people keep saying, "Oh, why can't we take two running backs?" And of course, I think we all expect Nick Singleton to emerge at some point, and with the transfer portal, that room can thin out very quickly. So I wouldn't ever say it's
Sure.
not possible that they couldn't take both, but just when I look at other positions, I don't see a need for two running backs this year, but maybe I'll be wrong.
It's the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. It's Tuesday, June 14th. That's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. We're rolling along here through another week of recruiting at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can join us for all the latest insider info for $1 for 1 year of access. You can find a link to that if you're not a subscriber right on the BWI homepage at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And if you are a subscriber and listening, thank you for joining us, and please make sure you look for the latest news inside the Lions Den Forum, and also, of course, on the homepage. Ryan, let's move into the decommitment that Penn State suffered on Monday. This was one you broke on the message board over the weekend. It was as something that it was looking like Penn State was going to lose a commitment from a three-star offensive lineman, Josh Miller from Virginia, and ultimately that's exactly what happened. He flipped to Georgia on Monday just after recently visiting the Bulldogs down in Athens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he camped down there. It's Georgia, guys. They're national champs. You could talk about NIL. You could talk about shady payments, whatever you want. It's Georgia, okay? They're the defending national champions. I think if a lot of other Penn State commits got the attention that from Georgia that they got, they'd consider it too. I'm not saying all of them, of course, and that's just, again, it's the same with Alabama. It's the same with Clemson back in the day, not quite as much now. They are the top dog right now, and you're going to lose recruiting battles to the top dog sometimes that you don't see coming. So it is kind of what it is there. He and his teammates did go camp at Georgia. I believe it was June 1st. I believe it was June 2nd, somewhere in that ballpark. Look, his team goes down there because they want Josh, So like, I mean, at the time we were like, oh, well, it's just a team camp, right? All his teammates are going there. They're just camping. That Life Christian isn't going down there unless Georgia wants Josh Miller. So that's kind of why I was always a little hesitant on how this situation is going to play out. The fact that he camped told me that he solidified his offer. One thing I didn't really realize was that Stacey Searles was a coach he had a very strong relationship with when Stacey was at North Carolina. He moved to Georgia a few months ago, and that's really how this all kind of snowballed. So, hey, I wish Josh all the best, man. He was incredibly good to me, and I don't really play favorites with that kind of stuff. I just develop relationships with guys, and I appreciate the time they give me. So I'll be pulling for him down the road. But it's certainly a loss. Yeah, I expect him to be a player who continues to move up in the rankings. I've said for a while now that I think he's one of them probably more underrated guys in Penn State's class. He's losing weight. He's looking good. And, this commitment to Georgia now will certainly get people's attention.
I would assume there's no chance Penn State can work its way back in this recruitment. This should be pretty much
not that I
book
see.
open and closed.
No.
Yeah.
I think
and does Penn State have a replacement plan in your mind, or where do they go from here now that Miller is a Georgia Bulldog commit, not a Penn State Nittany Lion commit?
Figure out Evan Link. Try and figure out your tackle situation still. Not saying they can't take another interior guy. They could. It's just, will a quality interior guy who stacks up with, Birchmeyer or Javen and Donko, like, will another guy emerge that is worth taking? They didn't need to take 6 offensive linemen this year. That, right now I still think 5 is probably, there's a good chance that happens, but we'll see. So I don't think they have to replace him, but if there's a quality guy out there, then yeah, they certainly will. But I still think it's, figure out Evan Link. There's a few other tackles who I've talked about on the board that I'll leave there as far as players to keep an eye on who I know Phil Troutwine is pursuing, but we'll see with this one. I don't think having another guard is an absolute must. Definitely figuring out tackle is an absolute must. And like I said, if somebody pops up and has real interest and there's a good relationship there, then yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Penn State, like we said, still a top 10 class in the on-3 consensus at number 9. So we'll see if they can move up the rankings here throughout the rest of the month of June. Ryan, there were a few offers to underclassmen that went out over the weekend after Sunday's elite prospect camp. I think obviously most of these guys are still working their way through the recruiting process and trying to figure out sort of what they actually want in the school and where they can go and get offers and so on and so forth. So we can run through these guys quick. I did have the list in front of me. I don't know if you still do. If not, I will talk long enough until I can find it. Yeah, go ahead. Run through these guys quick. I did it. Yeah, go ahead. Run through those for us.
So the lone 2024 offer was Kevin Haywood out of Archbishop Wood. I'll have an interview with Kevin here coming up here soon. Still very early in all these guys' recruitment, so I don't want to pretend that Penn State offer means more for this guy or that guy. Kevin was born in Maryland, lived in Pennsylvania for the majority of his life now. So yeah, of course, a Penn State offer means something to him. But look, he has, I think, Rutgers and UConn so far, maybe one other I'm not thinking of, but just a long way to go with Kevin. But the fact that he came up here, camped with the staff, put up some good testing numbers, did well in on-field drills. I fully expect him to be someone that Troutwine pursues here moving forward. The other 3 offers were all to 2025 guys, so some young up-and-coming players. Brett Clatterball is a very interesting linebacker prospect to me. He's already 6'2", 220 as a rising sophomore, so I'll be very curious to get some updated information there. Actually, I do need to. Actually, may have been a little less than 220. I need to maybe update that profile. But Virginia Tech, West Virginia, are a couple nice, solid offers here. I believe Virginia, I think, just offered last night, I want to say. So, solid-looking player out of Culpeper, Virginia, and somebody I expect the staff to certainly get back for a visit here later in the year. Oh, one other thing. Kevin Haywood told me that he is probably going to come back for the Lash Bash. So that'll be something we talk about here in the weeks ahead. Trent Wilson, quality line prospect from St. John's in D.C., Maryland, Pitt, USC, Notre Dame have already offered. So this is looking like a player that we're going to be talking about a lot in that 2025 class. 6'3", 270. Like I said, I need to double check on some heights and weights for these guys. That I'll circle back with. But that's what we had for his own 3 profile. And then Michael Thomas is a really good looking wide receiver from Donovan Catholic, and a player that I know Penn State has wanted to get a look at for a while now. They mentioned him to me, I don't know, probably a couple months ago, just as a player. I need to, check out his film. So the fact that he got up here, camped well, 6 foot, 175, lots of room to grow still. I think he's going to be an intriguing player as well. Boston College and West Virginia have offered. So handful of young guys coming up, getting offers. And really that's kind of what camp feels like now, man. It used to be juniors and sophomores, and those are the guys you kind of focused on at camp. Or now it kind of feels more like sophomores and freshmen, just because a lot of juniors, rising juniors, if you don't have an offer by now, a lot of guys seem like they don't really want to camp, which again, like we talked about the other week, I think with T Frank or with you, just intriguing to me. It definitely feels like the years for camp, the guys you focus more on the younger guys now.
Yeah, very interesting. But as we all know, the recruiting world changes quickly, and if you don't change with it, you will be left behind. So Penn State's
Mm-hmm.
certainly adapting there. Any final thoughts, Ryan, as we come down the home stretch of this edition of the Blue White Illustrated BWI Daily Recruiting Show? Any final thoughts as we wrap up here? Penn State did have a 7-on-7 last week. They'll have a Wednesday camp this week, which is new. Anything you want to bat around here before we get out of here on Tuesday, June 14th?
Let's see. Well, Tony Rojas is on an unofficial visit to Georgia today. There's that Georgia mention again. They seem to be coming hard
Right.
for a few of Penn State's prospects. Of course, they just got one in Josh Miller. Tony's just down there for an unofficial visit, so he does still have an official schedule to Georgia for the end of the month, and of course, will be at Penn State this weekend. He put that information out at almost like midnight last night, so I don't have a ton to add on it, but I do know he's just down there for a straight unofficial. So, I don't know. That's probably not a good thing, right? You don't want to be a player going to Georgia twice in 2 weeks when Penn State's trying to wrap these guys up on official visits, but that'll be something intriguing to watch.
Right.
Let's see here. Joey Schlaffer ran a 4.6 last week when he came up for
Impressive.
7-on-7. That's very good for a 6'5", 215 player. I mean, that length, that I thought that was better than I thought. I thought he was more like a 4.7, high 4.7 kind of player. So that certainly grabbed my attention. And 1-3 actually bumped Joey to a 4-star. I missed that, I believe, last week when we were doing those coach interviews, Greg, last Wednesday.
Yeah.
1-3 did some updates to their rankings, and I missed that Joey was a 4-star now. So that's intriguing. He's still a 3-star in the consensus, but 1-3 bumped him up to a 90. He's actually the number 6 player in Pennsylvania now, and I think that's about right, man. He continues to get a little bit bigger too. There's a lot to like with Joey, especially after seeing that time. But 7-on-7 camp was good. Tyseer Denmark was the guy to really watch. As I've said before, the June 24th 7-on-7 will be the deeper one. But Gonzaga was there. Quince Orchard. I said Quincy on the podcast last week, and someone laughed at me in our YouTube mention. So it's Quince Orchard, not Quincy Orchard. I fixed that.
Nicely done.
But just learn about some of their young guys coming up. That they're looking like a pretty good squad. Somebody I might need to go watch for a game this season. There's some good guys there. D.D. Holmes is a good prospect from Gonzaga that was up. So quality players there, but I expect those bigger teams that we see, the Mathas of the world, to be up here for that 2020 or the June 24th one. One other team to mention was Canarsie too. They had some pretty good quality players coming up through the ranks, but good 7-on-7 tournament. There's only so much to take out of it though, when there's like 3 or 4 quality teams, and a lot of the other ones were, really smaller schools in Pennsylvania that just don't have the athletes that can hang with some of those guys. So I don't want to put crazy stock into it just because, again, we didn't see too many matchups of those 2 quality teams going against each other. And hopefully we'll be able to see a little bit more of that June 24th.
All right, Ryan. Well, for everyone here at Blue White Illustrated, you'll want to check out bluewhiteillustrated.com for the latest Penn State information as the recruiting cycle in June heats up. Ryan's been posting updates almost seemingly by the hour, so make sure you check us out. And again, if you're not a subscriber yet, don't wait forever because the deal won't last forever. It's 1 year for $1 of access at bluewhiteillustrated.com. You can, of course, find us wherever you find your audio and podcasts, and then youtube.com/bluewhiteillustrated for T. Frank's film breakdowns, and, of course, the BWI Daily each day. For Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. We will catch you next time. This has been the BWI Daily Recruiting Show from Blue White Illustrated.
Drop my headphone.